Шановні колеги, ми продовжуємо роботу. Тема наступної події – презентація діяльності Національної гарячої лінії з питань протидії домашньому насильству, торгівлі людьми та гендерній дискримінації організації Strada-Ukraine за 2016 рік. Нашими гостями є Катерина Левченко, президент організації Strada-Ukraine, також Ольга Kalashnyk, віце-президент, та Альона Kryvulyak.
Good afternoon, dear friends. We have Kateryna Levchenko, Olga Kalashnyk and Alona Kryvulyak from Strada-Ukraine. Dear colleagues, today we would like to present you results of the activities of a national hotline on counteraction to domestic violence, human trafficking, and gender discrimination for 2016. But before speaking about the results of its activities, we would like to provide some background of its operation. This year, La Strada marks the 20th anniversary of our advice provided via hotline. The first such hotline was first launched back in October 1997, and this was mainly aimed at countering the human trafficking. But later we understood that the home violence was more important because it stimulates human trafficking, it stimulates an attempt to escape from the family and from the country. So since 2003, our hotline has got the status of the national hotline, and the scope also extended. We dealt with not just human trafficking, but also prevention of home violence. Then, since 2006, we added to the scope of hotline just not a response, but also consultations. That is, people could come and get consultation. And now we have actually two branches inside our hotline. National hotline. National hotline means that you can reach our hotline dialing from all the mobile operators and regular ground lines, landlines. Since 2006, our hotline became all day round. We provide response to all day round, all week round, 24 hours per day and 7 days a week. And this was first supported by the UN Population Fund, and but later some other donors joined it, and actually this is a hotline supported by different sponsors every year. Now, our national hotline is the only national and free of charge national line in Ukraine devoted to prevention of gender-motivated violence and gender discrimination. We have representatives from the Ministry of Social Policy, National Police, the Ministry of Youth, Family and Sports, academics, experts. We are supported by business structures, by Avon, by L'Oreal corporations, which demonstrate high level of corporate social responsibility and wish to prevent gender-motivated violence. As for the customers, they can get information anonymously and confidentially. If any person wishes to provide or disclose information about herself to the law enforcement bodies, she can do this, but actually that's upon the customer's discretion. So the number of calls in our hotline. Here you can see on this slide the number of calls, and in 2016 the number of calls had increased sharply, while in 2015 we had a bit more than 9,000 of calls, but since 2016 we had almost 4 times more, and this demonstrates that we have a better capacity. Please do not think that in 2016 discrimination or human trafficking or home violence had grown considerably 4 times against 2015. This only shows that in the previous years we were not able to provide consultancy services to all those who need it. By the way, in our room here, we have a lot of consultants from our hotline to whom we are very grateful for their devoted work, and you can approach to them after the event. Good day, I am Alona Kryvulyak. I would like to describe more about the statistical information which you see here on slide.
It's here there are 2 diagrams which could show how many calls we receive at night, and you see that's practically 70%. We did not expect that at night so many calls we will be receiving at our hotline. We also have now more phone calls from men. I will talk about that later. Nevertheless, if in the previous years 85% of all the calls were from women, now the number of calls from men went up, and in 2017 we have big numbers talking about phone calls from men. You can also see how the calls are distributed along the regions. Our hotline is the national, it's around the clock. Every day, every minute, we receive phone calls from all people who live on the territory of Ukraine. And you can see such record figures in Donetsk and Lugansk region and Autonomous Republic of Crimea, even though it's now difficult for people to call, but the number of such calls goes up, and I have developed a comparison table showing Donetsk and Lugansk regions. You can see how the figures changed from 2013 till 2016. If in 2013, 14 and 15 we had maximum 1,000 calls, 2016 impressed us with its figures. Donetsk region, almost 3,000 calls from citizens who live in Donetsk region, and Lugansk region almost 1,500. During the whole period of time, we never had so big figures talking about phone calls. And also in 2016, we for the first time opened the category calls from the occupied territories, the territories which are not under the control of Ukrainian government. Talking about our categories now, such a category as gender domestic violence shows high figures in 2016. That is 90% of all our calls which we received last year. The category talking about the category violence and cruel treatment went up. People are talking about that. They want to address these problems. Also in 2016, the category of calls on the violence in the families of IDPs, even though IDPs do not position themselves as IDPs, but they call with same requests. They're talking about home violence and human trafficking. And then if the consultant starts looking at it more attentively, and the consultant finds out that these people are IDPs, even though the IDPs are not talking about that. We also have we talking about the situations when the man beats, humiliates at the time when the woman calls. And this in these figures went up because we work on holidays, during the weekends. That's when the home violence is more active. Also, we see more phone calls on the problems with physical health as the result of home violence, domestic violence. Also, the number of calls from men from 18 to 32%. Mostly these are requests of phone calls from men who are victims of violence, or from men who are aggressors, who violate, but they understand that something needs to be done with that, and they are ready to talk to a psychologist to understand how to change such situation in the family. Once we're talking about such category as preventing human trafficking. In 2016, the number of calls went up as to getting married or getting divorced with the foreigner. That category was one of top categories, talking about number of phone calls always, but in 2016 it went up. Also, the number of phone calls in the category private or tourist trips of Ukrainian citizens abroad. That's related to the fact that because of political situation, many people are trying to leave our country, go abroad, and they want to see some information, customs and traditions of other countries. The number of phone calls on the problems related to problems of foreigners on the territory of Ukraine. What we saw in 2016, that some discriminatory actions, they are directed against the citizens of Russian Federation. Also, people who are missing, who disappeared, but on the territory of other countries. And also the number of phone calls went up from children whose parents are labor migrants in other countries. If we take such categories, gender discrimination in 2016, it showed some trends towards increase of number of phone calls on discrimination in labor sphere. Also, it's 7 times higher when it comes about raping, there are 8 times more phone calls on gender stereotypes, and that is the combination of the category of gender and discrimination and gender-based domestic violence, and also the number of phone calls on sexual abuse went up, especially at work and in universities. The category phone calls from demobilized military and members of their family, that's the category we opened in 2016. Thanks to the work of 24 hours hotline, we receive many phone calls at night. The main request from that is work with the psychologist, because many of them have post-traumatic syndrome. 20% of all the calls are on violence in the families of demobilized. These are either women or parents or children who are calling, and 15% of all the phone calls are on the possibility to receive by the servicemen the social assistance. They complain if they cannot get this. Another new category, which we opened in 2016, is the phone calls from the territories which are occupied or not under the control of Ukrainian authorities. Again, we receive them mostly at night. What we can help is we can provide psychological advice, and many requests are about psychological support and work with the psychologist, because the psychologists, they do work at night. And also what was interesting to follow, the phone calls from occupied territories on the violence in the family and outside the family, they are similar in numbers. Also in 2016, we registered the phone calls on labor sexual exploitation on non-controlled territories. One of the tasks of the hotline is to redirecting. We have the database where we have the contacts of all the international organizations, government authorities that do similar work. So we, besides consulting the subscriber, we can give them the list of the bodies where they can go locally. Thank you. I will give the floor to Olga Kalashnyk.
Olga Kalashnyk, president of Strada-Ukraine organization. Very important for the national hotline. These are standards and principles upon which it is based. La Strada, which is operating the hotline, is a member to the European network Women Against Violence. The members to these organizations are 46 countries of Europe, and in 43 member countries of this network, they have the hotlines similar to our, which is created by NGOs, and in 18 countries of Europe, such hotlines, in 18 of those countries with the hotlines, they have round-the-clock hotlines. And Ukraine is one of those 18 countries. Thus, we have very close relation to the international network of hotlines. There are specific standards set by these organizations, and also Article 24 of Istanbul Convention, which says that the member countries have to establish at least one national hotline, which could be free for subscribers, and where consulting could be provided in different languages in line with the needs of customers. And our current hotline in Ukraine complies with all those standards. It is extremely important to mention the set of services provided by the hotline. This is in line with the Article 22 of Istanbul Convention, which stipulates that the special services supporting women should be established, and our hotline complies with this principle, with this provision. The major principle upon which the hotline should be based are anonymity and confidentiality. If a woman with children is a victim of violence, then the way of quitting from the situation is rather long, and all the time of such a long-term way out from the situation, such a woman requires psychological and consultancy support. Then the anonymity of the hotline and accessibility of the hotline telephone numbers. Quite often the violence are of combined nature, which means that the victims suffer from economic violence too. And this means that they should be able to call to us even in difficult economic situation. Then the very important principle of non-assessment, non-evaluational approach to the victims. Unfortunately, quite often the victims who apply to state hotlines, they face this attitude when their actions are assessed somehow by the consultant. Then this year, the Population Fund of the United Nations supported development of special mechanism of our and standard operational procedures, and very soon they will be published. Cooperation with the state structures is important to popularize our hotline number and information about services provided. Jointly with the Ministry of Education, we developed these banners, which you see on the slide. And the next slide shows informational campaign, those video teasers which promoted our national hotline. We are very happy that the government officials from the National Police, Ministry of Defense, and prominent politicians and civil servants joined this campaign and promoted our hotline. Thank you very much, and we will be happy to answer your questions. Will you please represent yourself and then ask? I'm Mikhalchenko Alena. I'm a lawyer from Labor Initiatives NGO. Could you please describe more about your regional branches? How many consultants do you have in the regional branches? How they are distributed? And what are the distribution between lawyers, psychologists, etc.? We have just the national office. We do not have local branches because we are the national hotline. We are a network of civil society organizations, state structures, law, legal support services, etc., where we can redirect people. We cooperate very proactively with civil society organizations and public organizations like Kyiv Center of Legal Aid. And for example, we can redirect people. The consultancies are organized in shifts, which work up to 4 hours, and our consultants work on the hotline in shifts, in line with the labor. Olena shifts consultant in gender issues. Whether there is any coordination with 102 National Police hotline. Of course, the coordination between us and them is very important because we provide to them training explaining when they should redirect calls to our hotline and to train them in the in our specific issues. I hope that our cooperation will continue, and since we do not have time here, we can continue